Coming up today, the 70th session of the UN General Assembly gets underway in New York. Over 150 world leaders will attend, including President Park Geun-hye, who will address the Assembly later this month. Korea's main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, passes reform proposals that will overhaul the party's nomination system. Plus, we'll soon know whether the US Federal Reserve will raise interest rates from near zero for the first time in around a decade. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome. It's 6 a.m. on Thursday, September 17th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to our early morning edition of Arirang News. We start in New York, where the 70th meeting of the UN General Assembly has begun. A record number of world leaders are taking part in this year's session. President Park Geun-hye is one of them. Heading to the US in just over a week, she's expected to garner international support for her North Korea policies. EG1 reports.
The 70th United Nations General Assembly kick-started in New York on Tuesday. About 160 world leaders, including U.S. President Barack Obama, Chinese President Xi Jinping, and even the Pope are attending the meeting, marking the highest attendance of dignitaries in UN history.
It is my great honor to open the 70th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations. A session which I hope will be truly historic. A session not just of groundbreaking decisions, but one of much-needed concerted action for people and for planet.
The UN General Assembly convenes every year to tackle issues of global concern and oversee the budget of the international organization. This year's assembly will see the adoption of the post-2015 development agenda and the follow-up to the UN's Millennium Development Goals, which were set 5 years ago, as well as the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. South Korean President Park Geun-hye is also expected to attend the General Assembly, as well as the UN Development Summit, where she will deliver a keynote speech. President Park will participate on the 26th in a high-level meeting of the Global Education First Initiative, as well as a special event about South Korea's Semal movement, co-organized by the South Korean government, the UN, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. On the 27th, President Park will preside over the interactive session of the UN Development Summit with Chilean President Michelle Bachelet. On the 28th, President Park will give another keynote speech in the general debate on key issues of this year's General Assembly. Amid the possibility that North Korea may test-fire a long-range rocket next month, President Park's itinerary is being closely watched by the international community. 이지원, 아리랑 뉴스.
The South Korean ambassador to the United Nations is seeking ways to introduce Japan's wartime system of sexual slavery to the UN Commission on the Status of Women. Ambassador Oh Jun made the remarks during a parliamentary inspection session by Korea's Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee held in New York on Wednesday. The ambassador said he was asked by Seoul's Ministry of Gender Equality and Family in 2013 to bring the issue up for discussion at the UN Commission. He said he would make it happen by next year. The ambassador also said he was reviewing ways to designate a Remembrance Day for sex slavery victims separate from the June 19th day, which the UN declared the International Day for the Elimination of Sexual Violence in Conflict. Korea's main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, adopted new reform initiatives at a Central Committee meeting on Wednesday. The move is part of its efforts to resolve internal feuds and stem the party's declining popularity. Ji Myung-gil reports.
Nearly 400 members were present at the NPAD's Central Committee meeting to approve reforms that center on adopting a new nomination process ahead of next year's general elections. The proposals call for an electoral committee of non-party members to nominate candidates for the next parliamentary elections, and including women and the handicapped in the nomination process. With the reform plan endorsed, MPAD chief Moon Jae-in said it was time to end the internal strife and move forward.
Innovation starts from now on. Our party will strive to achieve internal reforms systematically and change the party's culture to make fundamental reforms. We will bring the opposition forces together so that we can gain victory in the upcoming general elections.
Previously, Moon had put his position at stake by threatening to resign if the reform initiative failed to pass the committee meeting, which was in short also a confidence vote in his leadership. However, controversy still surrounds the vote as members of the minority faction within the party refuse to participate. When asked, the non-mainstream members emphasized that the party's new reform plans fail to touch upon the essence of the party's innovation motives. Moon's opponents claim that such an overhaul is designed to favor his followers in picking candidates, and that the party's mainstreamers led by Chief Moon are trying to use the reforms to further their own political agendas. Although Moon has renewed the confidence in his chairmanship through Wednesday's vote, chances are high that non-mainstreamers will defect from the party to form their own coalition. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Now staying with domestic politics, and President Park Geun-hye will donate 20 million won, roughly $17,000 of her own money to a new fund aimed at creating more jobs for young people. She hopes her generosity will spur more contributions from leaders within Korea's public and private sectors. Hwang Sang-hee reports.
$17,000. That's how much President Park Geun-hye will donate to a new fund aimed at helping young job seekers. Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn said during a meeting with other cabinet ministers on Wednesday that the president will also give 20% of her monthly pay to the fund every month. That comes out to roughly 3.2 million won, or $2,700 per month. The Prime Minister said he and other ministers will also follow suit.
We will try to expand voluntary contributions from the leaders of society, as well as the public and private sectors.
Nearly 1 out of 10 people between the ages of 15 and 29 were unemployed as of August, as companies remain reluctant to hire new workers amid the slowing economy. The fund, dubbed the Youth Hope Fund, was introduced by President Park at Tuesday's cabinet meeting. It is expected to be used for running social programs such as tailored training for youth. The government plans to establish a foundation within this year for the management of the new fund, with the hope that it will open up new opportunities to struggling young job seekers. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Now, eyes remain fixed on the U.S. Federal Reserve as it prepares for its interest rate announcement. The Federal Open Market Committee, which sets rates in the U.S., met on Wednesday and meets again on Thursday. Its latest policy decision will be announced at 3 a.m. Korea time on Friday. So we'll have details on the rate hike or rate freeze on this newscast in 24 hours from now. The meeting is being carefully watched as September has long been flagged as the month for a possible rate hike. There are also concerns a rate increase could lead to sharp capital outflows from emerging markets like Korea. The refugee crisis in Europe is turning increasingly ugly. Hungarian police have unleashed tear gas and water cannons on thousands of refugees during clashes on the Hungary-Serbia border. The police say they reacted when refugees threw plastic bottles and demanded the border be reopened. Now, footage shows refugees, including young children with injuries after the clashes. The United Nations has criticized the severity of the response. UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon said he was shocked and alarmed at the ill treatment of refugees on the border. He stressed that the refugees should be treated with dignity and their human rights respected. However, Hungary is steadfast and says the crossing with Serbia will remain closed for the next 30 days. Japanese lawmakers are continuing their heated battle over the timing of the passage of security-related bills that would allow the country's military to fight overseas. The ruling Liberal Democratic Party and the coalition partner Komeito held a meeting on Wednesday and reaffirmed their position to have the security bills enacted by Friday. The main opposition party is attempting to delay the vote as much as possible. It has vowed to prevent the vote before the Diet disperses on September 27th. By using delay tactics and agreed to take all possible measures to counter the ruling coalition. The opposition was backed up by thousands of protesters who gathered outside the Parliament building in Tokyo to stage last-ditch protests against these bills. Staying with Japan, global credit ratings agency Standard & Poor's has downgraded Japan's sovereign rating by one notch, from AA- to A+. The agency says Tokyo's strategy to boost the economy, dubbed Abenomics, is unlikely to turn around Japan's sluggish economic prospects. Japan is struggling with near-zero inflation and a shrinking GDP. With the latest move, all three major global credit ratings agencies, Moody's, Fitch and S&P, have Korea's sovereign rating higher than Japan's. Now, North Korea has been ramping up the aggressive rhetoric in recent days, giving out strong hints that a provocation could well be on the cards. So the question now is, will North Korea defy the US and the international community and go ahead with the big one, a nuclear bomb test? For more insight, Han Da-an spoke to some North Korea experts.
North Korea's series of threats to launch a long-range missile and to forge ahead with a nuclear test is almost becoming an annual event. Many South Koreans are immune to such repeated patterns of threat-for-bargain claims, but as unpredictable as North Korea is, no one knows for sure whether the reclusive regime would execute its proclaimed intent. So what will happen this year? While experts remain largely divided, some argue Pyongyang is unlikely to actually launch a long-range missile nor conduct a fourth nuclear test for some very specific reasons.
The announcement was made by a director-level aerospace specialist, not by high-ranking political officials. And unlike in the past, North Korea has not specified the time and place of the possible launch in detail. Also, they still appear to be in the final stages of setting up its new satellite system, meaning the launch can't come anytime soon.
Many experts also point to the international circumstances the isolated state is in as one strong reason why it's unlikely to implement these or further provocations.
Young leader Kim Jong-un is in need of an armed protest for diplomatic bargaining, as well as for domestic purposes. But with greater pressure coming from China, on top of mounting international criticisms, I think it will be difficult for the North to carry out its provocations in reality.
North Korea watchers in Seoul add that Pyongyang is trying to send a message of complaint to the international stage ahead of the planned U.S.-China summit set for next Friday. Han Da-an, Arirang News.
A South Korean inspection team began its two-day visit to North Korea on Wednesday in preparation for next month's reunions of families separated by the Korean War. The team is made up of 14 members of technicians and Unification Ministry officials. They're expected to check the venues at the Mount Kumgang Resort where the reunions are set to take place. The South Korean Red Cross has also started to work on verifying the whereabouts of 200 family members listed by North Korea. The two Koreas will exchange a final list of 100 family members from each side early next month. For 45 years, the Semelundong, or the New Village movement, has propelled Korea's modernization, and it's now spreading to other countries as a model for sustainable development. Here's our Oh Soo-young for part 2 of her special series on the Semelundong.
Korea was one of the world's poorest countries in the years following the end of the Korean War. The Semelundong movement has since been credited with putting Korea on the path to becoming the modern and relatively wealthy nation it is today. Launched by the government in 1970, it inspired community development based on diligence, self-help and cooperation. Villagers toiled together to build new roads and infrastructure. They also undertook agricultural reforms. Spreading from village to village, Sema's can-do spirit quickly became a nationwide movement. In under a decade, Korea's per capita income spiked more than fivefold, hitting more than $1,500. The country also achieved significant growth in health, education, industry and transportation. Since then, Korea has been helping other countries build their own Semaeun villages by training leaders, sharing technology and setting up the necessary infrastructure. Now leaders and experts from 60 countries are paying homage to the movement at the Global Semelundong Forum. They're showing the Semai spirit of unity with an early morning walkathon. Participants are also joining hands to launch an international organisation called the Global Semai Development Network.
The organization has been launched to help people in poverty around the world by sharing the Semai spirit, nurturing leaders, exchanging information and implementing projects.
This will help spread Korea's Semelundong across developing nations, helping them tackle poverty and make better lives for their people. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Gyeongju.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Have a great day, and thank you as always for tuning in. Goodbye.